Good evening and welcome into Tennessee Volunteers live on the Voice of College Football Network. Tucker Harlan and Jordan Binkley with you again on this lovely Monday night, Labor Day night, I should say. We are into college football season now. Appreciate you guys joining us. If you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe to Tennessee at the Voice of College Football. We're live every Monday at 8 Eastern Time. If you like what you see, it really helps us out. Please share us with a friend as well. Get you close to all the great Tennessee football content that you enjoy. As you guys can probably see, we have a very special guest here tonight. He is one of my contemporaries at UT. We ran around in the CCI hallways together. I think he's secretly an LSU fan too, so he might not be a huge fan of this whole Tristen Keys flipping thing. Also, probably the second most famous Carnes Beaver that I've ever met as well, only behind Deshaun Bishop. Please welcome Caleb Jarreau of the Maryville Daily Times. Caleb, how you doing on this wonderful Monday evening?
I'm doing all right. I always appreciate a Carnes Beaver shout out. Shout out Deshaun Bishop, he looked a lot more like his Carnes self on Saturday night than he had in previous games with Tennessee. So shedding tacklers and ripping off runs before getting tracked down was a Carnes staple. So go Beavers by God, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always good to shout out the local high schools as well. You don't see many guys coming out of Carnes in general. Not exactly the biggest football power in Knoxville, but hey, he's the pride and joy of Carnes High School now. He's one of the best running backs in that room. But we'll get more in depth on the running backs later. But first, before we launch into this week's show, I do want to show you guys our merch store once again, because we have just rolled this out within the last week. And again, huge thanks to Mark Rogers over at the Voice of College Football and Josh Mahler of our Oklahoma affiliate for hooking us up with this sweet merch store here on the Voice of College Football website. You can check it out, vocfb.com. At the top, there is a key that says shop, and then you can scroll down and check out your favorite team on the shop as well. If I can pull this up here, I don't know why it's not sharing. Oh well. We'll just X out of there for now. But we got all kinds of stuff on there. We got shirts, we got polos, sweatshirts, coffee cups, beer koozies, all that fun stuff on thevoiceofcollegefootball.com. If you want to see something on a t-shirt, we can probably hook you up with that as well. But, we can't put everything on a t-shirt. It's just part of the letter of the law in the athletic apparel business. But, again, we would appreciate it if you guys check that out. Feel free to purchase some merch as well. It helps us out a ton as well. All right, so let's get into what we saw over this past weekend. We did the post-game show this week, and I usually have a little bit of a hard time with post-game shows directly after, just because I need time to really marinate on some things, or ruminate on some things, I should say. They're marinating while I'm doing the ruminating, but you get the point. But now that I've had time to think and we've had time to process, I think this is a good time to look back at what we saw in this first weekend. And honestly, I'm really glad Tennessee played this game first instead of ETSU, because you see what you saw last year against Chattanooga in week one. You're like, oh man, this team is going to be so great. It's Chattanooga. Red flags are going to show up later on in the season. But when you see it against a team like Syracuse, you're a little bit more optimistic about some of the things that you were able to do in that game that went well, because it was against what we are thinking will be a quality opponent. At least down the stretch here in Syracuse. So, Caleb, were you at the game on Saturday? You usually travel.
Yeah, I was. I was covering preps on Friday night. Got a ripe 3 hours of sleep, and then was in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium at 8 a.m. So, because as I'm sure y'all know, if you don't plan for like 2 hours of traffic on the way to Atlanta, then there's a chance you don't make your destination. So I allotted that time, and there was no traffic in Atlanta or Chattanooga. So I probably should have played the Powerball this weekend for how lucky I got with that trip.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. That is incredibly lucky. Because Obviously, we know about the Atlanta traffic. The Chattanooga traffic is sneaky bad too. But the good news is when you're taking 75 down there, you're just going down through the east side of the city. You're not really going through the thick of it, which is
Yeah, you still get most of the construction site though, which is basically the whole
oh
city
yeah,
of Chattanooga. So, but yeah, I was there. Pretty big. I mean, it was a 45,000 and so crowd on Saturday, but it was mostly Tennessee, and the press box was on the Tennessee side of the stadium. So, in the press box, it was really loud. But if you were on the opposite end zone that said Syracuse, it probably didn't feel as loud. But I agree with you. I mean, I will never complain. My only complaint is I wish I'm not a big fan of the neutral site games. I think they
yeah,
should be on a campus.
Yeah.
But starting with a big game really, is trial by fire very quickly.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that we all like to see for this team, just given some of the uncertainties. We wanted to learn about this team pretty quickly, and I think we will probably have a very good understanding of who this team is here in a couple weeks after that Georgia game. But let's look into the matchup itself on Saturday. Just some different components of the game. We got to start off with Joey Aguilar, I feel like, because that was, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest question going into this game was how he would perform, having learned this offense in basically 3.5 months, and doing so against a quality opponent. And I'm not going to say he passed with flying colors, but he did a very good job just entering into this system that he's just picked up, and really executing well. I thought, and I thought Tennessee would come out running the ball a little bit more in this game than they did. They ultimately racked up some rush yards as the game went on, and 247 yards on the ground is still a great outing. But I was shocked to see Tennessee come out throwing the ball the way they did. I thought after that first drive, even though it ended in a field goal, there was a very fearless attitude, I would say, about Tennessee, just with Joey Aguilar on that first drive.
Yeah, and I think you saw a lot of good things there, and it's almost the level of trust they put in Joey Aguilar that you saw. I mean, first play of the game, he talked about how they practiced and scripted that drive all week, and you see a screen concept that you didn't really see last year, but Joey ran it, almost to perfection. And I think the big thing for me was when you went back and watched the game, and in real time it's hard to see, but I went back and watched the TV tape. Joey starts his eyes on one side of the field, and if that doesn't work, he flips to the other side and then makes something happen. You haven't seen that last year, and I mean, I wouldn't even say you saw it as much the year before. I think Joe Milton obviously had a better season than Nico, but still, some of those full field reads you didn't really see. Another thing I really like too is anytime Joey did run that wasn't a designed run, his eyes were downfield the whole time. The first one that comes to mind is that Star Thomas touchdown. One hitch, two hitch, there's nothing there. He rolls out of the pocket. He's not just instantly running and, barreling headfirst into a linebacker and then saying his helmet got cracked. He's looking for a running back in the back of the end zone and making a play. And another thing I enjoy too, and people complain about is, some of those deep balls were underthrown, but if you overthrow a deep pass, there's no play for anybody. If you underthrow it and you have receivers who have high IQ, like I think Tennessee does, they can draw PI, they can make a play on the ball. They can at least bat it down if it looks like it's going to get picked. So I just think overall, you saw a lot of good things from Joey. There's still some issues too, which I think were bound to happen. He's always been a guy who missed high a little bit, which is part of the reason for some of his interceptions. So they'll have to clean that up. But to your point too, Tucker, you saw a lot of, the screen game almost acting like the run game early on. Some of those passes where last year we didn't really see them executed as well. Just hitting Braylon Staley on a screen, hitting Mike Matthews on a screen and getting out of the way and letting them go to work, or faking a wide receiver screen and then hitting Deshaun Bishop, which I think was the one he took 26, 27, 30 yards. The one where he got hawked down, but you could really see that, that play design worked. So overall, I think you take a lot from this outing from Joey Aguilar. I was impressed. I was on the same page. I didn't think, it was going to be that good. I thought it was going to be a lot uglier of a game from Tennessee, but I mean, 16-28, 3 tutties. And that Braylon Staley bomb to kind of highlight the day. I don't think you can really ask much more from him for his first outing. The big gripe I would have is that third quarter felt flat, but I think that's just, first game woes. It's tough when you go up on a team 17-0 in the first quarter, to kind of really keep putting the foot on the pedal, foot on the gas, but ended up winning the game. So, but overall, I'd say, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves with the Tennessee won the trade, Tennessee this, Tennessee that. But I think for Tennessee's situation where you were looking for a quarterback, in late April, and you get a guy who took all the installs in and ran the offense with a lot of tempo and looked comfortable, I think best case scenario really for where Tennessee is at right now.
Yeah, I mean, he was only in the system. I mean, only on Tennessee's roster for a couple months, and I was very impressed with how confident that he looked. I mean, like you said, like being able to look at one direction, then switch the other, and then not feel like he had to like run away or force anything. Like, of course, there was a couple overthrows that he had. I mean, particularly like with the screens, but I mean, his confidence, I feel like it's only going to help him going into the future. And of course, we don't know how good of a quarterback he's going to be yet per se, but I will say that it's nice. I mean, with how little experience that he has with Tennessee's roster, I mean, it's pretty impressive that he didn't really look flustered at all during the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, Caleb, too, you made a good point about the underthrows, because you look at that first drive of the game that I highlighted earlier, the Chris Brazel drawn PI. That's one thing that can help you out a lot. But there were some high misses. The Ethan Davis screen was one that came to mind in particular. Other than that, though, I feel like some of this could be a little bit on the wide receivers. Like, for example, that Brazel drop on that crosser over the middle.
Hit him in the numbers.
Right in the chest.
If you shed that defender, you are going to the end zone, no question about it. And then Mike Matthews, yes, some of those not catches, but passes were well contested by the Syracuse defenders. But at the end of the day, he could have made a play on those balls. And I get it. Some of them were thrown a little bit behind, but Mike Matthews had opportunities, I felt like, to help out his quarterback, make his quarterback look good, and let him down in a couple different instances. So I do think it's a little bit of a two-way street there.
Yeah, my biggest worry with the overthrows, honestly, is just timing. The Braylon Staley one comes to mind, where it was a screen where Braylon had to leave his feet to catch it. And then, how quick those screens are. If that ball hits him in the chest, he gets 5 yards, gets hit, you're moving forward. But since he had to leave his feet, your wide receiver's already off the block. It's kind of a tough scenario where you get blown up. So honestly, I do think with the stat line, you have to chalk that up to some of the receivers, because you see some of the plays too where Joey's a veteran quarterback. Like, there are a couple slants where he makes sure not to lead his guy into the linebacker. Well, those balls aren't perfectly thrown. You're throwing it behind him so he doesn't get his head taken off. You saw one, I think it was Miles Kitselman maybe made a play where he threw the ball behind him purposefully so that way Miles could get the first down and then get down and not get hit. Well, that's not a perfectly thrown ball, but when you have a capable receiver, that's an easy play. And that's been an issue with Mike Matthews in fall camp as well. He's a super talented kid. Obviously was a 5-star for a reason out of Georgia, or high 4-star. But even in high school, he dealt with some of those drop issues as well. But once he gets the ball in his hands, he's super explosive. So you do have to work on that. Some of that too, Tucker. I mean, a lot of those guys weren't in practice for much of the fall, like a lot of red jerseys, a lot of injuries. So there's some continuity issues there too, because you got a quarterback who's been here just over 100 days. And you mix that with the fact that a lot of your receivers weren't practicing for a majority of the fall. And you get some of those issues where, maybe Joey thought he was throwing that ball to Chris Brazel, who's a lot more lengthy than Mike Matthews. But you're right. There was a handful of throws that still weren't catchable. I mean, you had 6'3" Travis Smith jump as high as he could, and it was still overthrown. But overall, I think the main thing that worries me is just the timing aspect, because you worry about if you're high on some of those screen passes, then all of a sudden your screen game is moving 2 yards backwards instead of 5 yards forwards. But overall, I think there's a lot of good to take. You still worry about what it looks like against an SEC opponent, and going flat, especially in that third quarter, kind of worries me. But I think there's a lot. Now that the first game is under your belt, I think there's a lot bigger fish to fry than the quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. And I think all these things are very coachable at quarterback. And with Georgia too, like that in 2 weeks, I get you saying that it could be worrisome against a team like that. You do have this week against ETSU to correct it, which I think is good. And the thing too about Georgia is, and I'll be honest, I didn't watch a lick of Georgia this weekend because they played Marshall, who had a whole new team. 75 new players, I think, was the stat on that Marshall team, which sounds about right, given that Charles Huff took everybody and more from Huntington all the way down to Hattiesburg. And then they got Tennessee Tech next week. So we're not really going to know a ton about Georgia up ahead in 2 weeks. So I think it's a little bit of a benefit of the doubt thing. Potentially is why I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic about Tennessee going into that game now. But I do think there's a couple other things we need to look at with this team offensively. And since we kind of brought this up off the top, just with you being a Carnes Beaver, let's look at the running backs. And I thought they all had good things that they did over the course of this game. Deshaun Bishop, like you said, did look very good at points on the screen passes in particular. Looked like his Carnes self, as you said, which is something that we needed to see from him. Just jumping into a much bigger role than what he had last season with Dylan Sampson in the room. But I'll be honest, I don't know if he had the best performance of the day, just given everything you saw from Star Thomas. That was a guy who I think was put down at second or third in the depth chart at points in fall camp. But I'll be honest, once we saw him in the game, I was just like, why isn't this guy getting more carries?
Yeah, and I think you have 3 running backs with 3 different styles, truthfully. I mean, you look at Deshaun, and I mentioned, he's back to his Carnes self. For people who didn't watch him in high school, it was, the first 2 to 3 defenders didn't bring him down. You either had to swarm tackle him or he got tripped up, something crazy happened. And I think for him, just going down the list of running backs, for him, he's finally healthy. He's put on a lot of muscle, and he spent a ton of his offseason working on some of those stabilizing drills where, hey, if I got to get on one foot or if I got to, shed a tackler, I can do it now. And I think a lot of that too is mental for him getting over some of those injuries. So I think you saw kind of, I guess, you're closest to a power back maybe with Deshaun, because we saw the speed isn't the best, but with the way he runs and the way he sheds tackles and always falling forward keeps this offense moving forward. And that's really big. And then you go down the list, man. Star Thomas, 12 attempts for 93 yards. That's a good day. And especially when you saw what he did in the pass game, taking the jump ball from Joey for the touchdown. All 3 of your running backs got in the end zone, but he did it through the air. And it's a veteran guy. Like, you shouldn't be surprised that big crowd, big stage shouldn't rattle him. He should be used to that. And I really liked everything we saw to Star Thomas. And a lot of the offseason buzz too on him, Tucker, was like, is he a true running back? Is he just a threat out of the backfield? But he looked like a running back one when he had the ball. And then you go down to Peyton Lewis, who's kind of your track star here. And, his long was only of 8 yards, but he had 8 carries for 38 yards. He's another guy too I like. So I think, honestly, at this point, I think you drop Peyton Lewis to 3 probably. But you look, with what the offensive line did, even without David Sanders, mixed with the 3 running backs all finding the end zone, and your run game is pretty secure. And you've got guys that, God forbid somebody rolls an ankle, gets hurt, you can go to the next guy up and, maybe, Deshaun's having a bad night tonight. You've got Star Thomas back there who's been through it all. And, they just all kind of agree that it's best if they share carries too, which I think is big in this day and age for guys to buy into the fact that you don't have to be on the field every down, especially with the way Tennessee plays offense. But also with Star Thomas, man, you see that he can pass block too, which shows his history and experience in college football. And when you've got a new quarterback, having that extra blocker back there and you need it is big. So I agree, man. I was super impressed with Star Thomas. Seeing Deshaun healthy was cool, obviously, as a Knoxville guy. And then Peyton Lewis showcased some speed and what he can be. And a good thing with Peyton Lewis, too, is he got his pad level down, which was a big issue in high school. He played running back like he was running track. But, he got his pad level down and found some holes. So I think your running back room is really, really, really talented and very good to have kind of that baseline with them, I guess would be the way to put it. So that way, anything Joey does, it's not going to be a one-trick offense. Now, again, when you face Georgia, it's going to be a much different beast than Syracuse. But, whatever happens with that running back room, you know what you're getting.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like Star Tom. I mean, like y'all are talking about. I mean, like he came in there and he was pretty surprising. I mean, because he may have been like further down the depth chart before the season started, but like You mentioned the touchdown catch that he had in the end zone. I feel like that's something Tennessee's missed at running back over the past couple of years, is like a running back that can make catches and really help out the passing game. And then on top of that too, there was that one play where Ethan Davis got he had that blocking penalty. And I thought that Star Thomas showed excellent vision there in the backfield. And I feel like that's another sign of like his experience that he had when he was playing at Duke. I mean, he seems to have good vision when he's got the ball in his hands. And like you said with Bishop too, a powerful runner. I mean, I think we all expected Bishop to be the number one running back going into the season, but now it looks like Tennessee's got a 1A, 1B situation with Peyton Lewis to clean up the work if he needs to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm impressed by Peyton Lewis too, just taking a step forward, because last year we didn't see him a ton, but it was a very feast or famine type outing with him. It's like you either see 7 or 8 yards from Peyton Lewis, or he's going to lose 4 or 5 on the play. Not much in between. And I think he's grown a little bit from that. But I just, again, I look at the other two. I don't know, Caleb, how he is not your third man on the depth chart, just given the skills of the other guys. That's a good problem to have. But I just think, because, and Jordan's right with Star Thomas, like I just don't think Tennessee's had running backs that have been able to just really showcase themselves in the passing game like this in the past. Like the only notable play I can remember in the last few years with a running back catching a touchdown pass outside of the one we saw on Saturday was that Jabari Small touchdown catch against Kentucky back in 2022. And granted, that's been a minute. You know, one of the big knocks on Dylan Sampson was, can this guy develop as a running back that you can use in a screen pass? Can he make the jump in the NFL? But it's good that Tennessee has a guy that can do that on this roster.
Yeah, and truthfully, when you look back at the last couple of years, it's kind of been overshadowed that your running back isn't involved in the passing game as much, just because there's so many other things people are talking about, whether it's Joe Milton overthrowing guys or Nico not playing well and everything that goes along with it. But yeah, I think anytime you have a running back that can be involved in the passing game, I mean, we saw Deshaun do it, saw Star Thomas do it. I really hope that we can see Peyton Lewis do it. Maybe ETSU is a good time to start testing that out, because if you get him in the open field with the speed that he's showcased, that, I mean, you can't teach speed, and he's got it. I mean, he was a state champion runner in Virginia, really, really fast guy all around. And I think if you can showcase that with him, but yeah, no, like you said, I think the play Star Thomas made is a pure like tight end wide receiver play. Like you don't see running backs doing that, but he's got that experience at being a pass catcher, and he's a guy that Tennessee trusts to do it. And I think not only using these guys in the passing game, but just getting them the ball any way possible, even if it's in screens, that you trust them to kind of have that feel in open space to kind of, I mean, it's really an overlooked part of the game, but it's tough, especially with some of the screens Tennessee's added. And I think Brooks Austin mentioned it, like they really hijacked all of Steve Sarkisian's screen game from Texas and put it in the offense, and it works. But you still have to have running backs, that understand how football works, have a feel for open space, know where their line is setting up so they can catch that ball and go. And like you said, that in the past 2 years, we've seen Tennessee lose that explosiveness on offense. That's what everybody talks about. But those deep plays are set up by, hey, let's hit Star Thomas out of the backfield for 5 yards. Now your offense or your defense is creeping up. Hey, here's a Deshaun Bishop screen down your throat. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, now we've got Braylon Staley 5 yards behind your coverage over the top while you were worried about who's covering the running back and who's not. So I think the more threats this offense can have, the better. And the running backs add to that, whether in the run game or the pass game. I think, truthfully, too, the DeJuan Morris drive was kind of weird when it was set in.
Yeah.
I'd like to see him a little more against ETSU, but I think right now I'd be shocked if Tennessee, barring injury, goes away from a 3 running back system, even if it is, less carries for Peyton Lewis compared to Star Thomas and Deshaun Bishop. I think you've got 3 quality guys, and with how long the season is, especially if they think they're making a college football playoff and playing even more games, spreading the load out for those guys is big.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the DeJuan Morris drive, because it was kind of an odd situation to bring him in there. It felt like, just because you had the other 3 guys in at different points in the game. I know they had been using him as a returner in this game, which is something I do want to touch on later. But I don't know why exactly you bring him in there when you're trying to protect the lead, and you've seen two other guys really help you out in the run game in doing so. So just not entirely sure what that's all about. One more thing for me on the offensive end that I'd like to talk about is this offensive line.
Yes.
Because it was thrown quite a curveball to start this game with the news that David Sanders was going to be out for his first game as a Vol. You have a couple guys that haven't started before playing in there that have been in this Tennessee program for a few years, Jesse Perry and Shane Mumarov, and in some cases playing out of position. But considering all that, I think they handled the challenge pretty well. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think honestly, I was shocked because you went from Jesse Perry did not pass block in high school. I know you're a Tennessee guy, Tucker. He played at the smallest private school division you can, running a wing tee, and it was all run blocking, hand in the dirt, maybe two hands in the dirt, just getting downfield. So I was already skeptical of him at right guard, though everybody had praised him and he put on a ton of weight. Going to right tackle and not skipping a beat was surprising to me, and I was impressed with what he did. You also throw Wendell Moe to his side of the field on that blind side to help him out. That was another worry, is having two young guys. What would that look like? But yeah, I was impressed with the offensive line overall. They didn't get a lot of attention, which I think is big. You don't want your offensive line getting attention. You don't want clips on Twitter like last year of guys just getting blown by on the offensive line. Sam Pendleton at center looked great. I mean, there are a couple high snaps if you really wanted to nitpick, but nothing that affected the flow of the offense. And he had a couple pancakes himself, and he's a super intelligent guy with FBS experience. So I think overall, man, offensive line is probably as good as you could have expected. And with how well they played, if they can keep that up, it really raises the ceiling for this offense because of all the other questions we had. You're still worried about receivers. You're still worried about quarterback. Coming out of this game, I think you really have a baseline of, all right, there's a couple more plays in the offense. Josh Heupel has changed things up a little bit, and these guys are going to be okay. Like it might not be a 2022 offense, but they played against a Power 5 team. If they do what Heupel teams do and hang up 70 on ETSU, all of a sudden you're heading into Georgia and you're like, man, these guys might not be that bad. So I think all in all, with the way the offense looked, and Cole Kubelik was praising them on Twitter, and I can't remember many times that happened last year besides Lance Hurd driving, I think it was Arkansas or Oklahoma, where Lance Hurd drove the guy into the tunnel. So it all in all, I mean, you can't really complain, and they stayed healthy. There were no injuries on the offensive line coming out of week one, and nobody seems concerned about David Sanders' injury that just kind of popped up in the middle of the week. So Heupel said he was surprised David Sanders didn't go. So I think that's good for the future, and hopefully this week would be a good week for David Sanders to get in and get some of those freshmen, nerves out of the way, especially at home, because Georgia, I don't think, is the time you want to do that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I was listening to 104.5 The Zone here in Nashville, and they had Mike Keith on, and he mentioned that as well. Like, maybe don't throw him into the fire against Georgia. Like, I'm sure we will see precautionary holdouts this week, and I think we're going to get to some once we switch over to the defensive side of our conversation. But that is not a guy that you want to do that with, I don't think.
No, I mean, I think it'll be exciting to see David Sanders come in, like, whenever he is fully healthy, whether or not it's next week or not. I mean, I know, like, read online his injury's still undisclosed right now, but I mean, I think the blockers did great, and not just like the offensive line too. Like, I saw a highlight on Twitter that I missed during the game of Ethan Davis. I mean, he was driving someone back. It looked like 5 to 7 yards way down the field. And, Sam Pendleton had a couple of good blocks as well. And he did have those over higher up snaps. But I mean, I feel like, it's not his primary position. I mean, he typically played guard, and, like, for whatever reason, I mean, I know he had a little bit of center experience at Notre Dame, but it wasn't like the position that he was expected to play at. And I think that he stepped up pretty well. And one thing interesting about the game, like, I think last season, Nico got sacked anywhere from 28 to 30 times. I mean, Tennessee not only didn't give up a single sack during the game, they only had 3 tackles for a loss against them for the entire game, which I can't remember a time Tennessee was able to move the ball so efficiently. Like, yeah, they had incomplete passes and stuff, but I mean, they were like averaging about 8 yards per play at one point. And I think a lot of that's due to the offensive line. And I mean, there's 4 new offensive linemen on the team this year, and somehow they were able to mesh well. And I think that the offensive line might be the biggest strong suit on the offense. I mean, but we'll see as more intense defensive lines comes up, because I'm sure Georgia will be a really good test. But overall, I feel like Tennessee's offensive line may have been the star of the show.
Really? Even more so than Joey Aguilar. Maybe the Aguilar is who we pay attention to the most, but I do think Tennessee, you're right, Jordan. They did well. I don't know if I'd call them the stars of the show, just because when they're doing well, you don't notice them.
Yeah, I mean, maybe so, but I mean, I feel like we put a lot of focus on quarterbacks to begin with. Anyways, especially with all the Nico drama in the offseason, I mean, it makes sense there'd be lots of talks about Joey Aguilar. And I do think that he played really well. And I think that he will be more comfortable as the season goes on, which he already showed a lot of confidence. But I mean, like when I see stats like only 3 tackles for loss, I know that the offensive line's like doing their job. And I mean, like we saw it with the running backs too, with Star Thomas breaking out and really showing promise there. Deshaun Bishop doing well. I mean, I think there's a lot of things for Tennessee to be happy offensively, and a little bit more concerns, a little bit on the defensive side, which I don't think we were really expecting heading into the game.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit now. This defense, I have a bit of a hard time figuring out what to make of this performance, because they did some things very well in this game. You force 2 turnovers, score a touchdown on one of those turnovers. 5 sacks is more sacks than Tennessee had in any game in 2024, which that's pretty impressive, just considering how deep you had to play into this group. But it did feel like this team kind of let Syracuse have what it wanted to, at least throwing the football, I thought. And I'm trying to think, too, the last time Tennessee gave up 26 or more in a win, I believe, was Kentucky in 2023 against a Power 4 opponent. So it's been a minute since that has happened. But I do think there are some pretty reasonable explanations. So, Caleb, and I think you know the answer to this, is this a result of the team taking a step back as a whole on the defensive end? Or do you think, like I do, that the injuries are playing a pretty big part in this?
Yeah, I'll split the middle there. Honestly, I don't think they'll be as dominant as last year, just because you look at the pieces you lost. So if you want to call that taking a step back, I guess that makes sense. But honestly, I would play the injury card into, you had a ton of young guys and first-time players out there mixed in with the veterans. So hopefully that's the cause of most of the missed assignments. Maybe a freshman missed a busted coverage or anything like that. But there's certainly red flags with this defense. I mean, your highest graded player was 3-star cornerback as a freshman, Ty Redmond, which I don't think is something you want to see, just from a pure who you have on the offense standpoint. The defensive tackle position, they're dropping like flies every day. And now back to Ty Redmond, he's going to have to be a starter now, because Ricky Gibson is going to be out for an extended amount of time. So you don't have Jermod now. You don't have Ricky Gibson. So your secondary, your cornerbacks are getting tested. Defensive line, Jackson Moy isn't going to play this week. We don't know what his future looks like, though. They don't sound concerned. David Hobbs is out. All of a sudden, defensive tackle now, you've got a JUCO guy in Jamal Wallace and Nathan Robinson, who is a really, really, really talented player, but can't stay on the field because he gets hurt a lot. So I am concerned about the defense. I think you have to look at the linebacker spot and wonder, how can you keep Edwin Spillman on the field? Because when he was out there, he played with his hair on fire. But that also means you would take off somebody maybe like Jeremiah Thielander, who is a really good linebacker in himself, but is probably more, the captain of the team or a leadership aspect. And then this all brings us back to, like, you're getting hurt by injuries on the defensive side. What are you going to do with Boo Carter? At some point, you have to make a decision. Like, you can't keep playing the middle line, because if you're good with Boo Carter playing, he can be at the star position. Jalen McMurray could flex to cornerback and help out those guys. If you don't want Boo Carter playing, you're going to have to be playing freshman at cornerback, I guess. And that's not something any SEC team wants to do unless they're 5 stars and generational players. So I think there are red flags for the defense, and I don't think we'll get answers for them this weekend. And honestly, I don't know if Georgia can test them either. You looked at what Carson Beck did last night after Georgia scapegoated him as the problem on the offense, and he looked fine at Miami. So you turn back to Georgia, what is Gunnar Stockton going to do? I have no idea. So it is. I do have concern, Tucker, about the defense, which I didn't think I'd have coming out of game one. I don't think it's a 5-alarm fire and burn the whole ship down, but I do think, you have to find some guys at those positions. And I mean, shoot, 2 more guys getting rolled up on, and all of a sudden you're might have to play freshman defensive linemen, which I don't think anybody at Tennessee wants to do, or guys from the FCS level who haven't stuck. I mean, they whiffed on the portal. They didn't get a good defensive lineman out of the portal for depth that come to mind. And man, imagine if you didn't get Colton Hood out of the portal, where you'd be at right now, because then you'd be in some really, really, deep waters.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the Boo Carter thing. The defensive line, I do think that's the most concerning part with the injuries. We saw Nathan Robinson leave the game twice because of them. Bryson Eason also left the game a time or two with injuries, although that could have been just cramping as well. That's a part of it this time of year, although maybe not as much in a climate-controlled venue. I do think, though, that the corners, at least the guys that we hadn't seen nearly as much of last season, did look better this year. You mentioned Ty Redmond being one of them. Colton Hood looked tremendous, I thought. Obviously very deserving of that SEC Defensive Player of the Week honor. And then one you didn't mention who, made the assist in that interception was Jalen McMurray. I thought he made some very nice plays this weekend. But back to Boo Carter, because I did want to ask you about that at some point. I really do think this team has a decision to make with Boo Carter, because the rust is rearing its ugly head. We can see it out on the field. It doesn't look good. And there's 2 plays that come to mind. They're both 4th downs. And I know the first one, maybe that's not his assignment, but, at least, stay in coverage with the guy before you turn your head around and look for the ball. I feel like it's not like he's going to get flagged for pass interference there, because there's enough room between the 2 of them. So I get it if that's an assignment thing, but the sack, I mean, Steve Angeli would look, because there was a play, I believe, right after that where he took off for a 1st down, not fast enough to escape him. I don't feel like. I know he's a smaller guy, but Boo's got to finish that play. And if you get off the field there, you're probably not giving up another touchdown for Syracuse. So, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but right now I'm having a very hard time seeing how Boo Carter is in a Tennessee uniform in 2026, just because of what we've seen through this first week and everything that we've heard from camp.
Well, I would have told you that in July, Tucker, honestly. So I think you don't have a hot take there. But no, I joked in the press box. There was a play that Steve Angeli just, threw a dart right over Boo Carter's head, and I think he kind of jumped late and couldn't reach it. But I joked that maybe if he was at those summer workouts, he could have jumped high enough to bat that ball down. But I agree. I think, honestly, to me, the biggest thing Boo Carter brings to this football team is his ability as a punt returner and a kick returner. And he's not doing those right now for Tennessee. He came in basically 3rd string at star. And, people who were on the field told me that he didn't really seem locked in. Like, he was just kind of hovering around, and coaches had to get in his ear to make sure he was in the huddle. So at what point do you just kind of boot the whole thing and just settle everything down on the defense and stop trying to rotate him in? Because like you said, the rust kind of does rear its ugly head. And I think, truthfully, for a guy that athletic, it might just come down to him not being locked in and not, I mean, it's a tough situation, man. If Boo Carter is going to be on the team and going to be a part of it and going to be one of your starting DBs, that allows you to flex a guy like Jalen McMurray, like I said earlier, to cornerback. And all of a sudden now you've got another cornerback after you're down your starters. So that helps you out there. And then he can always rotate in at star, kind of knows the position, all that stuff. He can play. That's what he played at Oregon State or Temple, excuse me. It's just, it's so aggravating that you have that issue, because there's so many people that'd be dying to be in Boo Carter's position, and he's throwing it away, and his mom's posting a ton on social media. And then he gets out on the field and seems to be a detriment, like you said. Like, that sack had to have been made. If that was, a quarterback, Diego Pavia would be a good example. If you don't sack him or don't track him down, all right, that's a good athlete in the backfield. Steve Angeli, the whole talk of the offseason was how he was the exact opposite of what Riley Leonard was in the backfield, and you don't wrap him up And then the coverage thing, like you said, if you want to make the excuse that it was an assignment thing and he was only playing his assignment, sure. But again, at some point, if you're going to be a playmaker, you got to go make plays on the defensive side of the football. So it's an aggravating situation, and I think it does end up hurting Tennessee. But I think I'm just not a big fan of the 1 foot in, 1 foot out approach. I would just like a firm answer of, hey, this is what we're doing with Boo. Because like I said, his best attribute is special teams. The whole slot receiver thing has sailed. That's not going to happen. I think he's a good DB in the SEC. I surely don't think he's bad by any means, but I think for this football team, his best attribute is that he could, flip the field on punt return and do what General Neyland loves and make presses in the special team game. But he's not there to do that. So, it's a weird situation, and I just think with the DBs going down, it all of a sudden puts a lot more stress on the coaching staff, because if Ricky Gibson was healthy and if Jermon McCoy was coming back in 3 weeks, I don't think anybody would care what Boo Carter was doing. But all of a sudden now you're getting down to your freshman in that room, and it's starting to be a concern, because a couple more injuries away, and all of a sudden your third string star, whether it was Boo Carter or John Smith off the side of the street, would have to be playing anyway. And I don't think that's a situation they want to run into.
Well, it's just sad, man. And you brought up a great point with the returners, and that's something I wanted to touch on. Just because, that's a guy that's by far, when he's playing, the best return man on this team. And, you look at the history of return men here at Tennessee. We can go all the way back to Willie Galt with this. They come through here every now and again, and you have one that's a really dynamic playmaker. Boo Carter had an opportunity to be that, and potentially be a three-way player, which is something we haven't seen here in a very long time. And now you're out there trotting out Dwan Morris and Braylon Staley out there. Not that those guys can't do it, but I just don't think they have that same innate ability, and I think that's something that Tennessee will ultimately be missing because of Boo Carter's choices off the field.
Well, it's a little bit of speculation, but I mean, Boo Carter, I almost wonder if he's not in the punt return game, or like not getting any reps on offense as a punishment from the coaching staff. I mean, he is the best punt returner on the team, and he didn't get the start initially for the game, and then when he was on the field, he wasn't performing the way that everyone hoped and expected he would. I mean, possibly because he was missing all those practices and team activities. Maybe I don't even know if we'll see him on offense for the rest of the season. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, it didn't seem like he was ever going to get a chance in the Syracuse game, even if Tennessee didn't continue giving up points. I mean, if Tennessee would have kept their foot on the gas the entire time, I still don't think Boo Carter would have gotten reps on offense. And then playing a freshman on the punt return game, I mean, I feel like it almost is like a punishment. And I feel like, maybe Tennessee didn't think that they could play without him on defense, so maybe that's why they kept him in there, but maybe they thought they were comfortable enough in the return game and offense to not use him. But it is disappointing to see where he's been, especially when there was so much hype for him last season.
Yeah, absolutely. Very sad stuff with Boo Carter. I'm having a very hard time seeing how he stays with Tennessee after this offseason. Looking around the league now, just after week 1, Caleb, is there anybody that is catching your eye for good or bad, I guess you could say? And specifically looking at Tennessee's schedule, is there a chance that you've changed your record prediction after seeing 1 week of college football?
No, I think, I was always I don't know, I never was a firm person on 8-4, 9-3, but I think just with the way the schedule plays out, that's where they'll end up. But watching Alabama play Florida State and then seeing all the discourse around that, like, I don't know if there's any truth to it, but somebody posted that players were door dashing McDonald's to the hotel at like 2 a.m. the night before the game and just staying up past curfew, or like inviting people to their room. And you just watch that game. Like, it started, I think it kicked off right as we, got back from pressers and stuff. So I had it on my iPad, and it was like, that doesn't look like Alabama football, what they're playing out there. And at some point we have to have the conversation of if beating Alabama is what it was, because I don't think it is anymore. Alabama used to lose and the college football world was just turned upside down for a day and a half or a week. I mean, even longer. Now it's like Alabama loses and, Kalen DeBoer has lost more to unranked teams than Nick Saban did. It's like, this is just insane. And then they have UL Monroe next week, and we know what happened when Nick Saban played UL Monroe. So who knows what's going to happen there. But, yeah, I think Alabama has to be the one that Tennessee fans, they're just chomping at the bit for, because if Alabama's all of a sudden, not good at football, then week 3 you have Georgia. We've seen what Georgia does on their first game of the year, especially the first SEC game, Kentucky last year. And then you look at Alabama having to go there. It's a tough place to play, but it's not the toughest place to play. I mean, Joe Milton operated there with ease before, weird second half things happened. And if they're not a good football team, I could see that fan base punting on them very quickly by the time Tennessee arrives. So I wouldn't change my score or my record prediction much, just because I know, how college football ends up playing out. But I don't know what's going on in Tuscaloosa. And, if they're looking for a new coach, I mean, there's this guy on College Game Day I hear is pretty good.
Yeah.
Won a couple championships. They could pick him up. But yeah, no, I don't. It's insane what's coming out of Tuscaloosa right now. And if you or anybody listening is bored, they need to go watch Kalen DeBoer's press conference today, because they pulled no punches. And he had a really awkward exchange where earlier in the thing, I guess he said, they had a great week at practice. And somebody asked him, like, you said you thought you had a great week at practice. What did you see that you might want to change? And he was like, who said we had a great week at practice? And
you did.
Like, yeah, that's not a good thing to have happen. So,
no.
And man, it looks like that job has aged him 10 years too, because he hasn't had trouble recruiting, and he hasn't had trouble in big football games. I mean, they beat Texas. He has trouble playing bad teams. I mean, Florida State. When he was at Washington, I think they had to walk off Arizona State on the championship run, if I remember correctly. So I don't know. He's a good recruiter. They got to get figured out on the field. I don't think Tennessee fans will complain that he can't get it figured out on the field. Or maybe he just needs another Michael Penix Jr. to get things right in Tuscaloosa. But that's the one I have circled. There's other games that really don't affect Tennessee, like, Texas going on the road or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, if Alabama fans punt on the year, and Tennessee fans all of a sudden, are having a good season going in, and Joey Aguilar looks good, I wouldn't be surprised if they took over the stadium. It's an easy stadium to take over. I mean, it's not the loudest environment ever, and I think it's really kind of turned into that wine and cheese crowd that people always complain about.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. The complacency is all over that place, I feel like. And, that is one of the only teams in the SEC that I would say, oh no, to after this weekend, just because they did not look good at all. The other one on Tennessee's schedule that I look at and didn't think much of, and this is not a surprise to anybody, but Kentucky struggling against Toledo a little bit. Zach Calzada, they're doing this whole quarterback roulette thing. It's not working out well for them. So that's the one other game, but again, we knew that. And then even Texas, I think, will be just fine. I know there were some complaints about Arch Manning, but look, the kid had to play at Ohio State the first game of the season. That's the number 3 team in the country and a reigning national champion. So I think they'll be fine. Although there is a disaster scenario in which they go 8-4 with a few losses in games outside of Austin. But again, it's improbable. Not impossible, just improbable. One other question for you on the note of this weekend, Caleb. Did you or did you not stay up late on Saturday night and watch Nico Iamaleava on the West Coast?
So I led off with the 3 hours of sleep, waking up at 5 a.m., driving to Atlanta, driving back after the game. So I pulled in for the second half of LSU, which was good football, and insane non-catch call in that game. Immediately flipped over to UCLA, and I made it through the first half, and I didn't see anything I wasn't expecting. I'll say that. That was ugly football. And I think, I didn't realize Kyle Whittingham had been at Utah for as long as he has, because that was crazy when they talked about how long he had been there. But, they have a good football team, and some people are saying Utah might make a playoff run. I wouldn't go that far, but I think, just the discourse around UCLA and everything happening there, and press conferences and videos of Big Nick and the family walking out and all that stuff. What a terrible situation for all of those involved. And UCLA, I don't think, I don't, Johnny Manziel couldn't be UCLA's quarterback and get them to a win the way they played. I think Nico was pressured on 60% of his snaps. Like Sure, some of that is on him, but you can't do anything when your offensive line was playing like they did.
Yeah, so you had what, 7 overthrows I counted by Nico in that game.
You were locked
You,
in. I wasn't that locked in.
oh yeah, I watched the whole thing, Caleb. I watched that, and he threw a pick on a check down that was supposed to go to his running back. And I get that you're saying Tennessee, it's too early to say that Tennessee won the trade, but when you look at all the baggage associated with that situation, had Tennessee kept Nico, it's not just about the on-field stuff here. The stat line obviously is not very good. He was their leading rusher. Their actual running backs, I think their leader there was 17 yards on the ground, which is not great. But again, it's the other stuff too. You don't have to deal with the antics by getting rid of him, which is why I do think Tennessee won the trade there.
Yeah, and it would help the trade argument if Tennessee's schedule varied very much. Like I think, they're probably going to end up the same place they were with Joey that they would with Nico. It's just like you said, you have a guy who's, mom is already, a fan of Vol Twitter and has talked about how grateful she is to be in Knoxville, how much she loves the city. Joey's talked about how much he loves the city. Like, if Tennessee, recently 8-4 is kind of like, oh no, is Tennessee falling back? But if you go 8-4 with a guy who actually wants to be here, I think Tennessee fans rather that a lot more than, like you said, Tucker, with Nico and all the antics. But you watched that game, you saw the same stuff. And I think Joel Klatt maybe, or somebody like that said, people are going to see how bad Tennessee's offense was, when Nico shows out at UCLA. It was one of the national pundits said that, but
it was
the performance you saw on Saturday night, at almost midnight was the same thing he did at Tennessee. It was read one side of the field. That guy's covered. So now I'm going to run the ball and take a hit. And there's nothing else in between. And then you just have the overthrows, or it just didn't look, you hit the nail on the head. They got a quarterback who can function. He's a veteran guy, and you don't have antics, and you have a lot of money in the tank. So I know you said you wanted to hit recruiting later. I'm sure having Nico off the payroll has helped a little bit.
Yeah, we do need to hit recruiting. But we do need to hit one other little promotional item before we get to that. But we do appreciate, as always, you guys tuning in. If I can find my promo here. Oh, here we are.
You can make a difference here at the Voice of College Football. Use the Amazon link. Financially contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Same shopping experience. It's easy. Go to any video on any channel. Go to the description section and grab the link right next to the capital letters that say Amazon. Use that link, and Amazon will instantaneously convert to your account, settings, history, everything intact, just like whatever link you use right now. No difference. Pay no attention to the product that you see right there. Just go search what you want. Don't forget the Amazon link. Thank you for your support. Sincerely, the Voice of College Football.
Okay, so like Caleb said, we do have some recruiting news this week. 2 pieces of recruiting news. I was actually a little bit behind schedule on show planning today just because I didn't know if the other would happen, but it of course did. But let's go chronologically here. First and foremost, you have a 5-star wide receiver flipping his commitment from LSU to Tennessee. Yes, of course, I am talking about Tristen Keys. Had been committed to LSU for basically 5 months, 6 months before flipping to Tennessee. And a big part of that, I think, now that he's done it, and we can say it, is the Adidas deal with Tennessee. He had signed an NIL deal with Adidas going into college. But initially, what are your thoughts on Tristen Keys and what he may bring to this Tennessee offense here in the future?
Yeah, I think, truthfully, not to sound alarmist, but I think it helps Kelsey Pope stay employed with the University of Tennessee because he continues to stack recruits, cycle after cycle when the performance on the field hasn't been there as much and the transfer portal haul was not that good either. But when he's recruiting the way he is, man, you look at Tristen Keys, like that's a guy Tennessee really, really wanted and they got. And then on both ends of the spectrum, you got Tristen Keys, who's probably your top target for that wide receiver group. Then you go down to like Tyreek Key, Tyreek King, excuse me, who isn't as highly ranked, but it's a Knoxville guy. So if you have a guy that highly ranked in Knoxville, you need to keep him. And then they went out and got the guy they wanted. So I think Tristen Keys, you could always kind of tell he was going to flip just because he kept recruiting, kept going on visits, kept talking to coaches, kept posting. Whether it was Tennessee or not was to be determined. But obviously he did flip to Tennessee, and that's a big get and a guy you can kind of have impact your offense immediately. And, we see the state of the wide receiver room right now. So I think it's really, really young, but I think, Keys is a guy who can push through and make an impact very early for that group. And that's what they need. They need guys who can come in early and play because, right now we don't see that. It took Mike Matthews a while. It took Braylon Staley. I think he had a lot of talent, but just didn't get on the field as much. So I think getting a guy like Tristen Keys is huge for this group.
Well, I feel like Tennessee hasn't really had like a dominant force at receiver since like Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman are there. So, I mean, hopefully Tristen Keys can be that wide receiver that steps up and ends up helping Tennessee in the passing game. And like, we saw signs that he was going to flip beforehand, like the dancing around in the locker room, the orange pants recently, I think at like a 7-on-7 event. And then, like, as you mentioned, Tucker, like the Adidas deal probably played a factor into his decision. But, I mean, like Tennessee's recruiting classes on a hot streak right now. I mean, they got the number 1 quarterback in the country in Faison Brandon. They now have the number 1 wide receiver in Tristen Keys. And then not to mention Gabriel Ascenda, who's the number 4 offensive tackle, and Sal Moa. I mean, Tennessee's got 4 5-stars on their team now, which I can't recall the last time Tennessee's done that. So like credit to Josh Heupel and the coaching staff. And like you mentioned with Kelsey Pope, I mean, continuing to be dominant in recruiting. I mean, I feel like this was a huge get for Tennessee, and they were a few moves away. I mean, if Hyder would have picked Tennessee, and the other offensive lineman, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, Tennessee would have had 4 players that were ranked number 1 at their position. So Tennessee's doing a phenomenal job at recruiting right now. And I think a lot of fans should be excited for Tristen Keys.
Yeah, so I did watch his highlight reel before we got on here today. And I, of course, liked what I saw. Just a 5-star kid, very much looks like a 5-star. He goes 6'3", 180, which is in the profile of some of the Heupel receivers that we've seen here. Guys like Cedric Tillman, Dante Thornton, even Chris Brazel. Granted, those guys are all very different wide receivers from one another, but I would say, if anything, he's closest to Dante Thornton just because obviously he's got the height, but also he's got the breakaway speed. Could definitely win the one-on-one matchups, can burn you in that regard. And one other thing, too, that I saw on the highlight reel that I liked, he's not afraid to show you that he can block as well. That's something that is always an added bonus in your wide receivers. And you've seen a couple really great blocking wide receivers come through Tennessee in the last 10 years in Juwan Jennings and Brew McCoy. So that could be a big help for this team in the future as well.
Yeah, I think Jordan brought up a good point with all the, truthfully, Tennessee's ceiling is probably around the 6, 7, 8 mark in recruiting, just with the way the sport is right now. Like, as much as Alabama's going to struggle, they're going to have the name brand. Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State. Those schools are always going to be up there in recruiting. A&M's always going to bankroll guys. So I think Tennessee, 247 right now for the 26 class shows they're 7 and overall in composite. I think that's probably the high end of where Tennessee can be. And I think you get a couple portal kids and you stay in the battle for these 5-star guys. Like Tennessee is always mentioned with these 5-star guys, like Jordan said. And all of a sudden you're going to have years like this. And hopefully you start to stack kids where, hey, Tennessee was in this kid's top 10. Then he's in his kid's top 5. And all of a sudden you look 2 years later and he's on the field in Neyland Stadium. Like that's how it happens. And staying in those conversations and having Tennessee be a name brand in recruiting goes a long way. And I think you see that right now with, being Hyder's second choice. Obviously not the best situation, but then you get guys like Tristen Keys, Mike Matthews was a big pickup in his class, like starting to stack 5-stars. Faison Brandon isn't talked about a ton, but he's, top quarterback, 1 or 2 in the class and is having that year so far in high school, or I think they're about to get started. So, it's just always Tennessee being in conversation, just in conversation for the 5-stars is a big step. but starting to land some of these guys and creating very good recruiting classes is big.
So one more recruiting news, or piece of recruiting news, I should say, from the past few hours, actually. Tennessee got a flip from Auburn and defensive end Hezekiah Harris. He was a 4-star, committed to Auburn pretty early in his cycle, like I want to say July 2024. So he had been committed there for over a year, and Tennessee's ultimately able to flip him. He'd been on several visits to Tennessee too. Like he had been committed to Auburn, but I want to say there were like 5 or 6 visits between now and then to Tennessee. But guys, what are your initial thoughts on Hezekiah Harris just after seeing him commit to Tennessee?
Yeah, I think both of these conversations, you've seen 2 guys commit in 2 important positions for Tennessee. You see a wide receiver and you see an edge rusher, and we've seen Tennessee recruit those positions well. And, with a guy like Hezekiah Harris, once again, a guy being that highly ranked and committed to Auburn with the way that program is right now, I'm not shocked that he's flipped. But it's a big pickup for Tennessee, and it's a big pickup for Coach Chop, who was really involved in his recruiting and was big in getting that last visit for him, and everything that goes along with that and closing the deal. And again, a lot of this comes down to, money and stuff, but Tennessee is really big on creating the relationships that, maybe if they're off on number, that those can kind of bridge the gap and seal the deal. So I think Tennessee just keeps stacking recruits, and you get guys like Hezekiah Harris in the building. And once again, you look in 2 years and that guy can be an SEC starter, or for a guy of his frame, honestly, he could, compete for a job year 1. So I'm not shocked to see that. And I'm sure the way Tennessee wants to use him and having James Pierce playing for the Atlanta Falcons now definitely helped in that recruiting, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I feel like he's got like a similar size to James Pierce too. Very tall, lanky defensive end here. And James Pierce was never the biggest guy in terms of muscle mass. But I mean, I feel like he's a good pickup for Tennessee because like we were talking about earlier about the depth at the defensive line being an issue, which is something I don't think we thought going into the season, but injuries has kind of like forced Tennessee into a difficult situation. And, Tennessee didn't really target many edge rushers in this recruiting class. Like he's the 3rd edge commit for the class of 2026. So I think he's a good get for Tennessee. I thought that, since he's got such a long body, it really was helpful for him getting tackles for loss, like being able to reach out and roll the running back up in the backfield. And if you look at a lot of his highlights, most of them are in the backfield. So he seems to do a good job at getting tackles for a loss. And he seems comfortable in all different types of stances. I saw him line up 2-point, 3-point, 4-point stance. The only like real issues that I see with him is like potentially pad level, but he's also like borderline 6'6", and the offensive line that he was playing against wasn't very big either that I saw. A lot of them look significantly shorter than him. But overall, 4-star edge. We know that Rodney Gardner is going to get the best out of the players that he gets from the defensive line. So I think he's a good pickup for Tennessee. With his size and everything, he has potential to put on a lot more mass. And I guess we could see his potential, but I still think there's just a couple of things that he could work on, or at least from a first glance.
Elusiveness and pursuit are 2 words that came to my mind when watching his highlights. A guy that can, like you said, Jordan, he's a little bit of a smaller stature, or at least he's not as heavy as some of these defensive ends that you see, so he can shift around a little bit, make it hard on offensive linemen. And he doesn't give up on the play either. You see many instances where it looks like he's blocked, but he sees the runner, and then he takes off, and the offensive lineman can't stop him, and he gets the runners down. So I think I like that quality about him. And that's something that actually, that now that you mentioned James Pierce, he had a little bit of trouble with it at Tennessee. The big knock on him going into the NFL was, can this guy be a really good run stopper? Because most of his stuff was just pass rush. And that's what got him into the first round. I don't think that's as much of the case with Hezekiah Harris. I think he could do a little bit of it all. In fact, I think he's much better at pursuing the run than what we saw out of James Pierce, just because it's not Not that whole bull in a china shop look that you saw at times with James Pierce just flying into the backfield, and then suddenly the running backs are 3-4 yards down the field already. But those are two big items that we had to cover this week in recruiting. We'll see if there are any more flips, but 24 commitments in the class now for Tennessee. So that means, of course, it's pretty full. All right, one more order of business before we get out of here, gentlemen, and that is the game next week. East Tennessee State coming to town. First game in Neyland Stadium in 2025. As you guys can probably tell, I don't have a ton to say about this game just because ETSU is an FCS team. Tennessee should win this game by a lot. It's just how it should be every single year, unless, of course, it's 2023, in which case you have a lightning delay. You don't run out of the tee, and all of a sudden Austin Peay's up on you at halftime. But they took down Murray State last week 45-17, and the big thing that you should know about them is that they're going to be playing two quarterbacks. Two guys, by the way, that used to be in FBS. Cade McNamara, who I don't know if he played here, but I know his family members. I think there was a Kyle McNamara that played at Lipscomb Academy when I was still in high school. Of course, he was at Iowa, got hurt at Iowa, and then I believe he transferred somewhere last year, and now he's at ETSU. And then the other guy is Jacoby Criswell, who started his career at Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't do a ton at Arkansas. In fact, he was pretty much just the backup to KJ Jefferson there. And then he was on North Carolina last season. By the way, if you want a score update there, 10-7 lead for TCU. But North Carolina started him, I think they did start him for a few games last year because Max Johnson went down that first game of the season against Minnesota. He was in that like basketball scoring game with James Madison where they lost like 70-55 at home. But that is what you should know about ETSU is they're going to run two quarterbacks, which does make it tough on a defense just because you don't know what you're going to get possession to possession. But at the same time, it is going to be very hard for them to develop a rhythm against Tennessee, I feel like, by doing that.
Yeah, I think it's a big week for your freshmen regardless, especially some of those newcomers. And I think, your best case scenario, honestly, is that you put together, maybe 3 to 4 good drives on offense where you can really test some things and you don't want to show too much, but you also want to make sure that, conceptually you have some things working there. And then you hand it off to the backups and let them go to work. I don't worry much about the two quarterback system. I think ETSU is probably, much improved from an FCS team that I think it was Pruitt faced whenever he was at Tennessee. But overall, I think it's, your normal group of 5 game where you're just working, trying to get those guys work, trying to get the guys reps and see what you have from some of those backups and make it out healthy. Because I don't think, like you mentioned earlier, I think some guys, might get the week off or might go through warmups and play one drive, but you got to get out healthy and hopefully get some reps for some guys.
Yeah, I mean, like bringing up the injuries and everything. I mean, that was like one of my biggest focus coming into the game is I feel like Tennessee, they need to get more experience from some of these backup players, of course, but also limit some of the players that were shaken up from last week. Like, don't overplay them too much. Get them ready for Georgia and come in, especially like the D-line group. Like we've talked about a lot on the podcast tonight, but Tennessee's going to need to get healthy from defensive line standpoint. And, like at one point on Twitter, they were saying, I mean, I didn't really catch it in the game, but Joey Aguilar apparently went down and like went into the tent at one point with apparent like hip injury or something like that. So, I mean, hopefully Tennessee could like score really quickly. ETSU maybe have a couple of drives of Joey Aguilar, put up some points, and then get to see some of the backups. Because, I mean, with how confident Joey Aguilar has been this season and the fact that he was named the starter, I would like to see more from the backups because what if the hip injury was to linger? Not saying that it is, not saying that it's a serious issue, but what if Joey Aguilar was to get into injury problems? I mean, Tennessee's going to need someone to step up and be able to perform. And, there's 2 young quarterbacks there on the roster that haven't had too much playing experience. So, I mean, I would like to see Tennessee use George McIntyre and Jake Merklinger throughout the game and just try to be healthy. And then like maybe get Boo Carter more active if they want to. But I just think that Tennessee's biggest key this week is need to get healthy and practice on a couple of things to prepare for Georgia.
Yeah, I'm not really putting a ton of big keys out there for this game. I just feel like there's some pretty self-explanatory things, like just get your young guys in there as quickly as you can. Want to see some Jake Merklinger reps, knowing that he was the guy that was Joey Aguilar's biggest competition for the job. Not that most of us thought he was really going to win that job, but again, that's a guy that you could see used a lot in the future. In fact, that's going to be the plan next year. So you're going to want to see a lot of your freshmen in this game, and you're going to have to in some places just because there's going to be some precautionary holdouts this week, if I had to guess. Again, Josh Heupel does not have to issue an availability report this week, and by me saying not having to, he won't. So, but that's all I got on the matchup. Any score predictions for you guys before we go?
I have no clue. It just depends how much the starters play. I think, everybody would love to see Tennessee hang the normal 50 or 60 on the cupcake game versus the past couple of years where, you're coming out of halftime, you're like, man, Tennessee could really use a touchdown right now, or this thing could get dicey. So I think as long as the game is well out of hand, I don't think fans will have much complaint because you don't realize how tough that is until you've sat through the last couple of years. Where games that should be 4-score games are not. So I'll go with a lot to a little.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the same page
Thanks,
as you.
Heupel.
I'm on the same page as you, Caleb. I mean, Tennessee hung up 45 on Syracuse last week, so I mean, I would just hope that they would score more than that. I mean, it's not the biggest deal if they don't. I mean, because they're not going to say it in the media or anything, but they're surely looking ahead of Georgia, I would imagine. So yeah, I mean, I would just say I don't have a necessarily a prediction, but hopefully they would score more than 45 points.
Give me, because you guys haven't already. Give me a nice. Let's get weird. 62-3. I think they get a field goal on them, but
Ooh, only a field. Hey, 2 Power 5 quarterbacks now, Tucker.
I mean,
2 Power 5 quarterbacks who can't win the job at ETSU, so they're playing both of them.
Maybe. I mean, Cade McNamara played at Iowa. All right, that where Brian Ferentz was calling the plays, and he only lasted like a month into the season. And then we got to see Deacon Hill in the Citrus Bowl, where I got decapitated by that football.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think you can really classify what McNamara did as quarterback play. It was like
just there.
Yeah, he was the point guard, except it was just handing off to his running back.
Yeah, that's basically all it was.
He was there to receive the snap, so the running back didn't hurt his fingers.
Exactly. Yeah, no wildcat formations in Iowa because that's what they're concerned about.
That would get too complicated. You can't do that.
Oh yeah, no.
That's why you got to keep the quarterback in.
they gotta keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah, no need to reinvent the wheel.
No. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight. Special shout out to Caleb Jarreau for joining us tonight. Caleb, tell us what you guys are doing over there at the Daily Times.
Yeah. Obviously a lot of Tennessee stuff this week. High school stuff as well. Let's see. No big matchups this week, unfortunately. Kind of a lot of boring ones. We got Maryville at Bearden and Alcoa at Gibbs would probably be the best two. But those would end up being blowouts if I had to bet. Now, if anybody's interested in D3 football, we've got opening week for Maryville College this Saturday. They're on the road. They play only 4 home games this year because they moved to a new conference and a ton of teams flaked on them. Or they moved to – listen to this. They moved to a new conference, schedule those new conference teams, and then those teams left the conference. So Maryville College was just left high and dry. So they'll play 4 home games this year. We'll have coverage of that and lots of UT, lots of prep football, and a little bit everything else mixed in between. But biggest thing for me this week is just UT football, and I'll have a story later this week on Alcoa's offensive lineman, Jacob Crow, who's committed to Texas Tech. So that's about wraps up everything from my end. But you can find all my stuff at Caleb Jarreau 16. And I'm trying to be better at tweeting stories, but I'll tweet live updates and then forget that, I wrote 3 stories from the game and forget to tweet those. So trying to get better at it.
So, Caleb, you're telling us the Scots got Pac-2'd like Oregon State and Washington State?
Yeah.
It was almost the opposite because they joined the conference
No.
and everybody else left. But no, they moved from the Collegiate Conference of the South to the SAA, which for a lot of Tennessee people they'll know because Rhodes is in there, Sewanee is in there, Center, which is right across the border, is in there. So for Maryville College, it's a better conference because they play a lot of closer teams. But then you also mix in there's a team in Conway, Arkansas that's in that conference, and then Trinity, Texas is in there as well. So their schedule is brutal because they've got a trip to Southwest Texas, a trip to Conway, Arkansas, and only 4 home games. So hopefully it'll even out next year. But they've got their work cut out for them. But I know if any Knoxville people are listening, they've got a ton of local guys on that team that I'm sure people would want to keep up with. So you can find all that stuff. We usually try to cover all of their games. Obviously, it's a little harder when they go on the road in Division III college football, but we do our best.
All right. Well, once again, we thank all of you guys for tuning in and watching us tonight here on the Voice of College Football Network here on Tennessee Volunteers Live. You like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe to Tennessee at the Voice of College Football. Really helps us out promoting our stuff. Really helps you get closer to all the great Tennessee football content that you enjoy. For Jordan Binkley, I am Tucker Harlan. We will talk to you guys again next week.